YouTube atheist favorites like Non-Stamp Collector, Dark Matter 2525, and countless others have done an outstanding job of identifying less popular passages of the Holy Bible, which reveal it for the execrable tome of obsolete Iron Age immorality that it truly is. The first cry from apologists in response to such exposure is typically that the verses have been taken out of context. Never mind that I'm hard-pressed to construct any hypothetical context that would justify forced genital mutilation, the murder of children, the suffocation of nearly every living thing on earth, the relentless torture of a man just because he was faithful, or any other deranged tales from that book. I would think that religious people should be less concerned with non-believers taking their Bible quotes out of context and more concerned with their preachers taking them out of their sermons. Now, depending on your church, you may notice that the scriptures chosen for weekend services are usually delightful parables about Jesus healing the blind or God providing manna for hungry desert wanderers to nourish themselves. Seldom, if ever, however, do services center on Bible verses that describe God's condoning of torture and slavery and shrugging off rape, nor do they explain him completely ignoring millions of his people dying of agonizing diseases as he apparently waited around 100,000 years of Homo sapien existence before finally inspiring some people, some of whom didn't even believe in him, to invent and apply medicine, surgical techniques, and vaccines. The fact of the matter is that the people taking Bible verses out of context more than anyone else are preachers themselves. If you get the bulk of your holy text read to you in a Sunday sermon once a week by a man or woman in a robe who handpicked it from the text, then you're not quite getting the full context, are you? Does any church on the planet actually start presenting verses from the Bible from Genesis 1 and walk its congregation through the whole book, cover to cover, explaining every verse 1 hour on Sunday at a time? Of course not. For one thing, that would offer a sense of completion if anyone ever did sit through the decades it would take to accomplish the task. Then why would they ever need to go again? It would also only be a worthwhile venture if the same people would be at every service from start to finish with the same preacher, which would never happen because new members come and former ones leave too regularly for the consistency required. In giving them the complete benefit of the doubt, the preachers are trusting you to go home and do all the heavy lifting on your own, flipping through pages and pages of the text on your own time, coming to them to sing praises and hear talks about isolated sections for an hour or so a week, then maybe ask a question or two afterwards. So how many people do that? How many Christians listening to these words have genuinely read their entire Bible? The staggeringly low number of believers who haven't read their own text leads me to believe that the conviction of their beliefs is not as strong in everyday reality as it is when their voices are vibrating the stained glass of church windows on Sundays, if they go to church at all. Plenty of believers don't even do that, and I don't blame them. I'd like to ask those of you Christians who haven't read your Bible about why that is. If you believe that this book was the inspired, inerrant word of the creator of the universe, who will pass eternal judgment of torture or paradise upon you based on how well you follow its teachings before you die, and you really believe that, would you actually think the best way to gain an understanding for the book's teachings would be to randomly read a passage from here and there with no consistency, context, or concern for the actual sequence of events therein? It would be just like if I believed that my soul were condemned to eternal torture or rewarded with everlasting pleasure based on how well I scored on a Star Wars complete saga test at the end of my life. So, to prepare for the test, I occasionally flipped in one of the randomly selected 6 DVDs and watched a fraction of a scene before punching the power key of my DVD player and shouting how incredible George Lucas is. Then, maybe a week or two later, I'd do it again with a separate DVD, watching another fraction of a randomly selected scene. It just wouldn't make sense. So my closing advice to you Christians who don't want us taking your Bible verse out of context anymore is to read your Bible from cover to cover, over and over, until you actually know the context of each verse yourself. Once you've done that, maybe we can have a more realistic talk about just how loving and moral your God really is. Though I recommend stretching your cerebral cortex first. You'll have some serious mental gymnastics ahead of you.